we're at 77, almost 80 folks. So we will kick things off here just because I want to stick to our schedule. Welcome everyone to our Founders Chat during Entrepreneurship and Innovation Week at Michigan State. It's a chock full week of activities, fun things happening around campus. Yesterday we had the innovation celebration, really highlighting MSU IP, hosted by our partners over at the MSU Research Foundation and Red Cedar Ventures, and the folks over at Business Connect and in the VP of Research office. And tonight is kind of a fun night. We get to do the Founders Chat remote event with two distinguished alums joining us tonight. So Joe Germanotta and Dan Romanelli. Should be a fun evening. We're going to run this webinar. We'll be, I don't know, semi-casual, I suppose. The way we're going to kind of spotlight your experiences, and both of you have such a wealth of knowledge to share with our students. I prepared, obviously, a few questions for us to get the ball rolling, but I imagine this to be a pretty dynamic conversation between the three of us, and we'll have some questions open up for Q&A via chat later in the evening, probably about 45 minutes or so, and kind of field some stuff from the audience. But this should be a fun event. So Dan and Joe, I'm going to just give you, I'm going to kick off by giving just a little bit of background on you guys. Joe Germanotta. Joe, I've been fortunate to get to know you over the last couple of years, and serial entrepreneur involved in restaurant business. You've been involved in tech. You've been involved in entertainment. Been involved as a restaurateur, investor. So wealth of experience. This is going to be fun because there's so many topics to comment on. And diehard Spartan, rocking the hat tonight. Greatly appreciate it. And Dan, thank you for joining us. I know we haven't had a chance to get to know each other as well, but looking forward to growing this relationship. But Dan is the former president of Warner Brothers Consumer Products, the licensing division of Warner Brothers, amongst other things. I know you're also an active investor and have done some really cool projects over your time in entrepreneurship and innovation. And tonight, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, a lot of different topics that we've discussed as a group, kind of queuing up for this event. So I'm really excited to have you guys tonight.
Thank you.
So maybe we'll kick it to each of you first. Maybe if you want to do just your affiliation to Michigan State. I always like to start this conversation with kind of what was your formative experience like at Michigan State, or the memories you kind of bring back the most that kind of bring the spirit of Spartan Nation to the conversation.
All right, I'll kick it off. All right. Well, I graduated in '79 in the School of Business, with the focus on hospitality. I also took classes in finance and computer science. That was really, I got to tell you, that was, out of everything that I studied there, the computer science was the one that I truly, delved into and really enjoyed, and it really became the foundation of my career when I started out. When I graduated, I went to work. I didn't go to work in the hospitality field, other than I worked at a public accounting firm that was specialized in hospitality. And I worked on feasibility studies for hotels and restaurants and buildings and shopping malls and et cetera. And that was an education in itself, right? And I worked in downtown Detroit for a company called Laventhal and Horwath. I don't know that they're even around anymore. But from there, I got transferred to New York, there in public accounting again. And then I branched out into software. And that's where my career really started to grow, the software business. And, I went from consultant to programmer to salesman. All right. Which is where I really, once I realized I could make a lot of money in sales, that's where I stayed. All right. And then from there, I transitioned into the telecommunications business. That was around the time, you guys are probably too young to know this, but the Bell AT&T was the carrier. They were the only carrier at the time.
Yeah.
And they broke up into the 7 or 8 different Bell systems. And as a result, there was this shortage of talent. And so they plucked all the people out of the software business to go to work for telecommunications companies. And then, my career kept progressing in telecommunications. And then I started, I was in international telecom, and I started a business for prepaid calling cards. And I grew that business and sold it. And then I had another business that I started up. It was for Wi-Fi in hotels. And I built that up to about 100 locations, and I sold that. All right. And then I was pretty much retired, and I decided to go into the restaurant business. And, there's the old saying that it's like owning a boat, right? You love it the first day, the day you sell it,
Right.
But I'm in the restaurant business. In fact, I was talking about it with my wife today, and, I was saying how I want to get out of it. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I thought about it, and I said, well, I guess I got to stay in it, because if I have nothing to do, I'm going to go crazy. So that's my career.
Abbreviated.
That's my abbreviated career, right? There were a couple of other things that happened in the middle that were missteps. Dan and I made some investments together. And neither one of them took off.
We'll talk about that. We'll save that that's a good conversation piece.
Right. So, Dan, why don't you take it from here?
So I'm a lot older, than Joe, and I graduated in 1964 from Michigan State, and I was around. In fact, in Bubba Smith days, when they had the big football team, which, by the way, I loved Michigan State. It was a great experience for me, a lot of great friendships, and I love football, still love football. In fact, Joe and I often watch football games together and either celebrate or get depressed, so depending on the outcome. But I was a huge fan of all of Michigan State sports, still am today. And I do remember there was one of my first jobs at Michigan State was I was in Shaw Hall. Does Shaw Hall still exist?
Oh, yeah.
And there was we had a radio station, WASH. And I, disc jockeyed it at night. And there was a big party going on in the dorm that night, and I felt like I kept on announcing, will someone please call and let me know you're listening, because if you're listening, I'll stay here. And after about 2 hours, no one called. I played the Star Spangled Banner, and I went to the party, and that next morning I was fired from the job for shutting it down early, but I had a good time at the party. Anyway, so I was actually in pre-vet medicine, but my father had an Italian restaurant in Manhattan on West 56th Street. And I switched from pre-vet because it really wasn't for me. And I studied restaurant management. And I went to work for my dad as a bartender. But my dad and I both knew that I wasn't destined to be in the restaurant business. And I met an executive from Warner Brothers, and who used to come in and have cocktails there, and we became friends. And I said, I'd love to go work for Warner Brothers, thinking, oh, I'm going to be production. And he hired me and put me in an exchange program there. They called it the exchange, but it was distribution product. And the interesting thing is, the first job I had was, in those days, they were still playing Bugs Bunny cartoons in movie theaters. And I was booking Bugs Bunny cartoons in movie theaters. And if someone told me 25 years later I'd be selling Bugs Bunny t-shirts, I would have said bad career path. But the end of the day, that's pretty much what happened, and it was a great career. And I'm happy to talk about that, but what I did for the most part, I was with Warner Brothers for 23 years. I started a division myself because of an experience I had selling cookies with Nabisco, to Nabisco, with Bugs Bunny. I'll tell you one short story of how I got in the licensing business. My wife had made carrot cake, and to raise money for the school, to for the kids' school, elementary school, and it wasn't selling. And I remembered I had a Bugs Bunny poster at the house, so I ran back to the house. I hung it up over the carrot cake, and it sold out immediately. And Bugs was very popular in those days.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience in licensing, and it wasn't my last. It became quite a thing for me. I love doing it. It's very entrepreneurial, and I still consult and do a lot of licensing. I just did a deal with Clint Eastwood, and so it's one of the best things I've ever done, and will continue to do. And I have fun doing it. So having fun is really important.
Yeah. Well, this is a great segue to talk about, I think, licensing and entertainment, and maybe how we can bridge the gap in this conversation. It's such an interesting space, when we talk about creative intellectual property, and developing an eye for how something becomes more than just what it is in the first medium, right? And how do you do brand expansion? How do you think about those types of things? So Joe, obviously with your experience with your daughter, Stephanie, and obviously Dan, your experience with the Warner Brothers catalog, maybe both of you, could you tell us a little bit about maybe like kind of the do's and don'ts, and maybe the way you look for branding impact? And Joe, maybe even talk about your work with Art Smith, which I think, Celebrity Chef, with Artbird. I see so much parallels between what you can do in the restaurant industry and expanding upon someone's, use the term of the day, name, image, likeness to some extent, right? And in your case, Dan, the catalog at Warner Brothers, and thinking about how do you go beyond just the screen, right? And what makes a good deal from your perspective? I think this is such an interesting area for students to think about as they develop creative intellectual property, that it's not just, a one-shot thing. It's not just a song. It's not just a drawing or a painting or whatever. Like, things can be so much more. So maybe we can riff on that. I think that's an interesting topic for students.
Sure.
Well, I'll go first. One thing I didn't mention is I did manage my daughter's career for about 8 years. I worked with her since she was I guess 13 when it started.
Right? Not to interrupt, Joe, but if students didn't read your bio in advance, your daughter's Stephanie Germanotta, also known as Lady Gaga, for those who don't have been paying attention.
No. So my initial career as let's call it a father manager was carrying her piano up and down the stairs. Okay. And bringing her to gigs every weekend. And but she was a natural branding talent. I mean, she really knew how to get people's attention. I mean, I can tell you a funny story. All right. She used to go to clubs and represent herself as her manager, right, to get into the club.
Yeah.
And to book a date. And then she would show up as the performer. Confused, right? But from a branding perspective, I mean, not only in the music business, but in the restaurant business as well, it's once you create the brand, the real challenge then is expanding it. All right. And, kind of moving it across the spectrum of, we have branded wine glasses, we have branded hats, cookbook, and there's posters, there's et cetera, but they all have the Joanne brand on them. And then we sell them in the store and we sell them online. Okay. Now, from my daughter's perspective, all right, the brand is quite natural. I mean, once she became famous, then when she went out on tour, there were T-shirts and hoodies and eyeglasses, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know whether you kids know this or you students know this, but most of the most of the music business now is in live entertainment. All right, it's in concerts and touring. That I don't know if you probably, I don't know if you even remember what CDs are. Okay,
Well, strangely enough, Joe, as we discussed, now it's vinyl's back, right? It beats
Yeah.
CDs, right? So yeah.
So, but most of the branding gets carried through in the media,
Mhm.
okay, in the social media and the clear channels, and the radio stations, and the touring promotion. All right, so I would say from a branding point of view, okay, once you've got a business up and running, and the same thing happened with Chef Art Smith. I mean, we put together a restaurant in Grand Central Terminal. Well, the restaurant wasn't successful, but the brand was. All right.
Right.
As a result, we now have the brand distributed at 18 amphitheater locations around the country, so that when there's outdoor concerts, there's pop-ups and concession stands that have big pictures of Chef Art Smith on them, and we sell fried chicken sandwiches.
Right.
And you'd be surprised how many fried chicken sandwiches you can sell at these things. I mean, but I mean, that's the nicest business. That's much better than the restaurant business. The reason is because it's really hands off. I mean, once the brand is created, then you can get a royalty. And then you're making money while you're just sitting at home doing nothing.
But strangely enough, right? I mean, knowing the history of your first endeavor with art, right? You had a big plan for a big restaurant in New York, ended up not being successful just due to the overhead expenses and pandemic and all sorts of headwinds. But I know the pivot here is phenomenal, right? Like, without a failure, you don't get success out of this thing, right? Which is kind of an interesting thing.
Right.
And I think sometimes people get so frustrated, but sometimes it's the act of doing, right? You just get the momentum going, and look what you've created as a side pivot, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I believe in, patience, persistence, and timing. Okay. You got to, when you're starting out a new business, you got to be patient. It takes a while, and you're going to fail, right? But you got to pick yourself up and be persistent and try something new, and just keep trying things until you get the formula right. All right. And then, just at the right time, it's going to launch.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But you got to be patient. All right. If you work hard, you're going to get there. All right. Which is, but basically my daughter became successful because she was determined to be an artist, to be a rock star, right? From college. I mean, I'll tell you guys a story. She went to NYU. She was in the Tisch Performing Arts program, and then we took her out for her birthday after her freshman year, and she told us, "Daddy, I want to quit and I want to pursue my career." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, I can understand that, because this is your passion. You have your college money. You can have 1 year. Okay. You go out and you get yourself a record deal, right? You'll keep going. Okay. But if you don't get a deal, you're going back to school." Right? And she did. She pulled it off. She was persistent and she got it done. All right.
Yep.
So and she built up, a very, very strong brand. I mean, now she's leveraging it from, just the Lady Gaga and music. Now she's leveraging the brand into movies and
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy. We have the Born This Way Foundation. They're having the greatest year ever. Now she's got House Labs makeup, which is taken off. Right. But, she's really, she's smart at branding, though, because what she doesn't do, and she's never done it, is she refuses to exploit her fans.
Yeah.
So she won't, you won't see her, tweet or Instagram saying, "Buy my makeup."
Right. She's genuine about it.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
it's
they,
on its own.
yeah, they'll go on TikTok talk and they'll they'll do a makeup section, a makeup educational
Yeah.
TikTok, right? So that's how they keep developing that brand, all right? But that's really, once you get started, it's going to be natural,
Mhm.
all right? You'll know what works. And the way you'll know what works is because people will be knocking on your door, okay? So that's all I got to say about that.
Now, Dan, I think this is a good segue to your experience with Warner Brothers. I love the epiphany moment of selling carrot cake, put up Bugs Bunny. This light bulb goes off that you're working at a company that has these assets that could essentially be leveraged for all sorts of uses. Now we want to know the trajectory. Like, I mean, this led to movies and licensing galore, and there was this heyday where Warner Brothers, still to some extent today, right, with a lot of licenses they have,
Yes.
This is an amazing story.
Well, the interesting thing about that moment that I had at the cake sale where we sold out, and it was not good carrot cake, by the way, but I realized the poster did it, and at that time he was very popular. He was on, ABC and syndication, and he was, very, very popular. So I called Warner Brothers and I got the rights because they didn't have a bakery or cookie deal. I said, can I try to license this? And they said, yeah, we'll let you, we have to approve it, of course, and we'll give you a participation. So what I did was, in those days, you didn't have the internet. You had something called Redbook. And Redbook was this thick book. You remember that, Joe? And I looked up, and I found that Nabisco was #1 then, probably is #1 today. In fact, they did a Lady Gaga cookie recently, didn't they, Joe? Yeah. So
yeah, Oreo. They did an Oreo.
yeah. So I called up and I reached the guy who was responsible for bakery products, and I was flying to New York. I was living in San Francisco in those days and working for a television station, and I said, could we meet? I have something that I think would be very interesting for you, and would sell a lot of cookies and cakes and everything. And so we met in a coffee shop in New York. And I unrolled the same poster, and he had a big smile on his face. And I can't remember anything anymore, but I remember his name was John de Blasio. He was the cookie brand manager.
Okay.
And he looked at it and he said, you represent Bugs? I said, well, I'm working with Warner Brothers, who represents Bugs. And he said, I'll do a test. And I said, great. And but let's get together with the Warner folks. And we did, and we made a test deal. And then ultimately it went into Cookie Box, and it sold for like about 12 years very successfully. In fact, the reason they stopped it was cannibalizing the Barnum brand. So they just stopped it for that reason. And for me, it was so much fun because all of a sudden I realized, well, that's what licensing is all about, is taking, something that has great equity, brand equity, and turning it into potential sales, ancillary products. And so when I got to Warner's, I was, one of the luckiest guys in the world, because Warner's had so many properties, and they were doing licensing through a corporate entity, but they weren't really doing it as successfully as they could do it. And the next product I had was Batman and the movie that came out. And I remember that Peter Guber came into my office and showed me what he was doing, and he and I was just sitting there thinking, well, geez, I mean, oh my God, how lucky can a guy be? And I said, I'm very excited about this. And I went to my senior management and told them this is going to be huge, and we started licensing, everything. I mean, but the thing that really got me most excited, and I think it's a record to this day, is I flew to Bentonville and I was showing all my products to the guy who was head of merchandising. And in those days, they weren't as big as they are today, but they were still darn big. Yeah. And he I was pulling at Bugs Bunny this and that and whatever, and Superman, whatever. And he was interested, but not that. And then I pulled out this logo that was developed for the new Batman, which was really developed by a rock group out of England that wore it very successfully. I forgot the name of the group, but we kind of took it and used it. And I held this up, and he, in his southern drawl, said, "I like that." And he said, "We're going to support that, Dan." And I said, "Okay." And then I went back to LA, and the guy, in those days, we didn't have an exclusive licensee. We had several licensees, but the guy, I gave him the name of the person in New York because I knew Walmart worked with him. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Dan, you need to go on the road again." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "I got an order from Walmart today, preliminary order for 10,000 dozen T-shirts, which was a huge order, but it was so many that we ended up having 30 licensees just doing T-shirts. And we sold over 30 million black T-shirts, which I think is still a record to this day. It was an amazing situation.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know a little bit from both of you. These deals can be complicated, obviously, licensing and other legal matters and what you've seen. Maybe if you want to share for students as they think about, exploring even startups or, investing, or what are some of the traps and things they should be looking from a legal perspective that the two of you may have encountered over the years that would be helpful for them to be considering as they kind of jumpstart either their own ventures, or maybe they're thinking about how they can do some interesting things at the corporate level as an innovator?
Well, I mean, from a startup point of view, I think I want to think the foundation is don't ever give up control. Okay. You got to own at least 65% of the company. Okay. And because you don't want to dilute yourself. And if you take on, and don't have too many investors in the first round.
In the early stages.
Usually it's, friends and family, they call them angels.
Yep.
Right. Friends and family, and they're typically hands off. All right. They give you the money, and then they want to talk to you every once in a while about what's going on. And all they're really interested in is sales.
Right.
Okay. They don't want to see you, sometimes they want to know your burn rate, whatever. When are you going to run out of money? But that's the most important thing. On the starting out, retain control and have silent investors. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Early. Yep.
That way you can control the direction of the company. Otherwise, I'll share with you when we started up Artbird, the restaurant in Grand Central Terminal, we had 14 investors. Mm-hmm. All right. And it was a startup. So what happens when you got 14 different opinions, and you have meetings, and you've got 14 different people that are either happy or unhappy, right? And everybody's got a suggestion, and you end up spending your day, instead of running the business, you end up appeasing investors. All right. So that would be from a startup point of view, that would be my major suggestion.
That's great advice. Dan, I know you've invested a little bit along the way too. What are your thoughts, and maybe what you've even seen at the corporate level as things for students to be thinking about?
Well, as far as you want to look at the management of any company, and if you like the management, they're passionate about the brand. I mean, I've made investments that haven't worked, and some less that have worked and worked very well. And you just, part of it is luck, and part of it is skill, is trying to pick out the ones that you think people can relate to, that will be popular, and certainly catching it on the way up as opposed to the way down. And, I, recently put some very successful investment in a software company that had, I didn't care for the product or the game, but the guys who were running it were brilliant. They were, they were the ones behind Angry Birds.
Okay.
and you know, you so believe in the management that you know, you just know that what they're going to do is going to be great. And it was a very successful game, and they sold the company, and you know, so we all, you know, make mistakes, but this one was really the philosophy there was, it's a solid company, great executives, and they know what they're doing, and they're determined. And when you have something like that, it can be very much a winner.
Mhm. Yeah, bet on the jockey,
Yeah.
right?
I'm sorry.
I said bet on the jockey, not necessarily the horse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
actually, let me share our what was it, E-Urban investment, or Ojo?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that
Let's hear
was
about,
terrible timing.
let's hear about the terrible
Yeah.
timing. Yeah,
We
yeah.
were extremely early. Okay,
Yeah.
we Dan found a company that was making electronic scooters,
Right.
electric scooters,
Right.
right? And they were great. I mean, I love riding it. My
Right.
family, we took them out. We had a great time on them. All right. And the reason we bought in, one of the reasons I bought in, was because the CEO of the company, I forget his name, but he was the guy that invented the Super Soaker.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So we thought, well, if he was successful at making that toy, I mean, he's got to be successful at this. Well, it just turned out to be too early, and the wrong business model.
And also COVID hit,
And
and
COVID,
renting scooters was not, no one wanted to rent any
nobody
because
wanted.
it was dangerous, you know. But I think if it wasn't for COVID, I think we would have all done well on that. But sadly, that went away.
Yeah, sadly.
So it happens though, right?
It does.
Yeah, it's part of the game. What right now, what are the types of, well, so one question first before we get off the topic of kind of deals is what are your best tips for negotiating, either from like an investor's perspective or maybe as a founder's perspective? You guys have been in both situations, right? Negotiating a deal as an investor is a little different than negotiating it as a founder or maybe as a corporate innovator. What are your do's and don'ts or tips around negotiation that you would share with students?
Well, I think first and foremost, okay, I mean, you've got to have an attitude that you can negotiate anything.
Okay.
And if you think you have power in the negotiation, you have it. Okay. If you don't have that confidence that you have any power, you're not gonna get your way. Okay. If you don't think you have power, you don't have it. All right. So that would be the first thing. Know your opponent. Okay. And know, because they are, in the very beginning, they're opponents. All right. They want to come up with every reason why they shouldn't do a deal with you. All right. Be flexible, but don't give away the store. Hold your guns. And a lot of times, they respect you for that. Okay. They realize that what you're doing, you feel has value. And if you feel it has value and you don't give up the store, all right, they respect you, and in all likelihood, they're gonna invest in you. All right. And Dan hit it, right on the mark. I mean, they invest in the jockey, right? And whoever's
Especially
right,
really early, right? Yeah.
yeah, especially very early. I mean, if you have your elevator pitch down, and you can give a solid presentation, and you can demonstrate that you know where you are, you know where you're going, you've built a good team around you. Those are the basics for successful raising money. All right.
Well, in licensing, I can talk about two choices that I made. That one was a mistake and one was a success. The one that was a mistake, there was a television show that was enormously popular, but right at the beginning, the producer brought me the character Alf. Do you remember Alf? It was kind of
Yeah.
and I looked at it and I just said, nah, I'm too busy with Looney Tunes and superheroes, and I can't see this working. I didn't say that to him, but I thought that. And so I decided against it, and I was wrong. And it was a big success. And so it went to a competitor, and they made a lot of money, even though we were owning the property, the television property. So now on the flip side, the one that was a huge success was we did, if you remember, the Nike Air Jordan commercial, which was Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny, was very, very successful. And at a certain point, Michael Jordan's manager, Dave Falk, went to the studio thinking they're just going to love this. And Michael was in between careers. He was going into baseball. He had left basketball for a brief moment. And he wanted to do a movie with Bugs Bunny. And the creative people turned him down. And David Falk, his manager, called me. And I said, nah, why didn't you come to me first? I would have run across the street and said to do this. And so I went to see the head of production, and I said, I will guarantee you that this will be one of the biggest movies we will ever do, and you can fire my ass if it doesn't work. I was so sure that Jordan was going to make it work, and it did. Yeah. And it was the best thing I had ever done with Warner Brothers, and it was a great. And Michael was great, and continues to be great. I understand this new movie about Michael that is great too. I've heard.
With Matt Damon and Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
But Space Jam was amazing success, and it had a longitude, right? I mean, it just,
it was great.
Yeah, that's a huge win. Dan, I want to stay on the topic of licensing real quick, and I know I got a student who's got a Q&A, but I know we spoke about a recent deal you did with Clint Eastwood, and I think it's kind of fascinating because the angle here sometimes with licensing is that sometimes artists don't realize that their likeness is being used without their knowledge, right? And sometimes the best deals happen when you can kind of bring that to light. So I don't know if you want to share with us the story around Clint Eastwood. I mean, he's had a prolific career as an actor, obviously, and director, and has been in film for so long, but had never really imagined a licensing play with him.
Yes.
Right? It wasn't his style, so to speak. So maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah. So for the 20 so odd years, I would go to his office every time he made a movie, and he made so many, and showed him what we could do. And he would politely stand up and show me the door. And stuff. You win some, you lose some. With him, I lost most of them. And then about 3 years ago, a guy who used to work for me came to me and said, did you look at all of these illegal Clint Eastwood things that are being done all over eBay, et cetera? And I called his lawyer, and his lawyer, I said, we'd love to do, a Clint Eastwood collection. And the lawyer said, Dan, you know better. It's never going to happen. I said, okay, well, let me send you something. And I sent him all of the illegal eBay pictures of Clint Eastwood product. And he called me up and got mad at me. He said, you can't do this. I said, I'm not doing it. It's being done by illegal pirates all over the world. And if you want to stop them, do a legitimate collection with a first-class company. The Sideshow is a first-class company, and they were very excited about doing it. And the video I sent you shows, how happy Clint is with it now. He's 93, and he's making his last movie as we speak, but he loves this. And, I was very proud to finally get an approval from him. And, we're both old cockers now, but we're having fun working together. So
yeah, it's such an interesting story because it lasted so long for you, right? You're kind of chasing that potential for so long, and so it's fun to see it come to life for him.
Absolutely,
late in his career.
You got persistence to him.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Patience and persistence.
One last question before I kick it over to Shrisha, who I think just joined us. But if you were in college today, what are the topics you think you'd be spending time exploring if you were a student? It's always a fun one to think about.
Well, most recent, I would start taking a look at AI. I
Mhm.
mean, I think that's the next frontier. Can be a little scary, but I think if it's, if it's used in the right way, I think it could be a very valuable tool in not just education, but in business and I I don't understand enough about it right now and how it works, and I would want to learn more.
Mhm.
And um, I think the crypto days are over. Okay, as far
Mhm.
as I'm concerned. Um, and
Some of
maybe
the
the
underlying
blockchain. I think a more in-depth, experience with the blockchain is where that could be applied in just about every business there is. Okay, and maintaining a national ledger of of transactions. So those are the two areas that I would focus on. But I'm a geek. Okay, I like technology. So
Mhm.
Dan, you have any thoughts?
I love marketing and just bringing things to market and thinking about um, the research of why will something work or not work, and looking at past history and just it would be fascinating for me to focus on that and just more on the digital aspect, because today so much of what you see is on the internet, and how can you successfully launch products on the internet. The marketing to me is a very is key product is a key category that I really enjoy.
So we do have two students joining us, Shrisha and Madison. We'll kick it to them. I did have one question from Max Rose pop up in the chat, and he was wondering, from your perspective, is like, what are the best ways to accurately try to predict operating expenses in a startup mode? You guys have any thoughts on that?
well, most of your operating expenses and it's sales, customer service, and operations, right?
Yep.
In all of it. All right. Most of the expense is always payroll.
Yeah.
Figure
out your payroll first.
Figure out your payroll first. Who do you need? And then it's a matter of what can you spend for them. And in my experience, I hire people for, let's call it, their passion and their loyalty. Okay. If I know that they're gonna I can teach anybody anything. All right. If it's part of the business, they have to have the passion to learn. Okay. And the commitment to show up for work every day and get excited about it. So,
Awesome. That's great. Shrisha, so you logged in first. You want to take the reins here?
Yeah, sure. Joe, Dan, really nice to meet you both. Dan, you kind of just touched on this, and it's coming from a member from the Entrepreneurship Association. They have a question. They are one of the co-founders of Protein Pints. Protein Pints is a protein supplement brand that makes protein ice cream. And they're about to enter market, and their product is almost ready. And they're asking, what would you do if you were them, and if their goal is to be a nationwide brand in 5 years?
I'd go to Walmart first, see if I could convince them to, they're such a massive company and distributor, and but you've got to have to start somewheres, and you'd probably, introduce it to a Walmart, but then try to, pick a local market where you can get behind it, market it, promote it, have a success story or two, and then go back to Walmart again and show that it's really growing and working. And have you tasted it, or you?
It's very good.
Is it?
Yeah, it's good
Yeah.
product.
Well, get it to Joe.
Get it out there.
yeah, I'm not a firm believer in the direct to consumer business. All right. I right with Dan. Okay. You get a good product, you get a story to tell, and then take it to somebody that's going to buy pallets full of it.
Distribution. Yeah.
And then they have a built-in distribution channel.
Mhm.
Trying to do it, grassroots and, selling them a jar at a time or a container at a time. It's not going to get the scale that you need to
Mhm.
to pay attention.
Good advice. Make a really good product, develop the story, try to beat down those doors and get distribution.
Distribution is key. All right.
Okay.
Awesome. Great question. Thanks, Risha. Madison, hello.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Joe and Dan. So my question is directed to Joe. I know that you have done a lot with expanding your brand around your restaurant, and something that I have done is publish a cookbook. I saw you also published a cookbook. How have you continued to kind of expand based off your restaurant and be able to sell other products around that?
Well, I mean, mine is it's a single location, and there's an online store. Okay. I mean, my next step is to sell the brand,
Mhm.
right? Because now we're in business 11 years. It's got an international following. So many have told me, hey, well, let's open one in Vegas, open one in Los Angeles, etc. I'm 65 years old. I don't want to do that anymore. Okay? That's what I want to do is I would like to hand the brand over to somebody that's gonna proliferate Joanne restaurants in maybe 5 or 6 locations around the country, and then just travel, go from site to site, and meet the customers and show that there's a presence there, taste the meatballs, that kind of stuff. And then just, do a royalty. I mean, at my stage in my career, I want to do the least amount of work and make the most amount of money.
Mhm.
That's, right now, I mean, building the Joanne brand has been, it's been somewhat of a challenge because, you're dealing with the consumer, all right, and you can't keep everybody happy.
Mm.
But, it's been successful. The cookbook, it was very successful. It is a very big launch. I mean, we sold a bunch of them to Amazon. It's time. I mean, at this point in time, it needs a refresh because it's 11 years old, the cookbook. But that's some of the brand extension pieces. I mean, I looked at doing, bottling tomato sauce and things like that, but it's such a flooded marketplace. Okay. I mean, if you go into the grocery store, you'll see there's probably 25 different sauces from Rayo's to Ragu. Okay. And it's just too competitive of a business. And what you're doing is you're paying for shelf space.
Right.
Right. You want to be on the upper tiers so people can see you, right? And that costs a lot. So that's not a business that's a business that I walked away from.
But hey Joe, you were telling us last week that you're seeing maybe an interesting play with your meatball recipe, kind of in line with the chicken sandwich, right? Like it's kind of intriguing.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly right. What we're doing is well, at the Live Nation locations, the amphitheaters around the country, we're gonna start out this year with something that's called the Meatball Volcano. And they'll sell it in the VIP tent.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's a hollowed out sourdough bread that's full of meatballs. And you can get regular meatballs or you can get turkey meatballs, right? And then it's smothered with sauce and mozzarella cheese. And then we stick a great big piece of parsley in it, so it looks like there's a tree growing on the mountain.
Sounds amazing.
I'm getting hungry here.
But that's the next leg in the Artbird brand. I mean, right now they're selling chicken fingers and chicken sandwiches, and French fries, right? So we got to move that along and add something else to the menu.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, this Madison, thanks so much for the question. I know you've explored sauces and your cookbook and your branding. It's such an interesting play. Definitely. Oh, by the way, you guys should definitely check out her cookbook. It's called The Cut. It's amazing. We have a copy in our office. I would say, and this kind of relays with another student question, was around food and beverage. Joe, and your thoughts on this is, oftentimes people say, stay away from restaurants, stay away from bars. It's a tough business to scale, but I think what you're alluding to here is get creative and think about ways that you can explore venues that people aren't paying attention to. And Dan, you hit on this too, is like, think about maybe the sort of unobvious paths with some of these things. If it comes to food, or if it comes to branding, or if it comes to licensing, there's interesting spaces to explore beyond just, hey, the typical rent your space, hire your chefs, hope for the best. You can do some cool stuff nowadays.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, one thing that we did is, right after COVID, everybody was waiting to get out and there was no entertainment. So what I started doing is bringing in young entertainment, like people that were just starting out. They're in the clubs like the Bitter End and the Knitting Factory, all these clubs downtown, and they would come in and they'd perform on the weekends. And we started with one night a week. Now we're doing 3 nights a week, and it's blossomed, and it brings in customers, because customers, now the other things that we've done is during COVID, when we couldn't have restaurant customers, we opened up a store, right, with Italian specialty store, so that we had olive oils and dried, sun-dried tomatoes and tomato sauces and things like that. And then we also sold some of our other products out of the store. I mean, you had to be creative to figure out how you're going to make money, right? Because you still got to pay the rent. All right. Mm-hmm. Those were 2 of the most significant items. Now what's happened is that I've got a unique property that has outdoor space, and because of COVID, there's a backlog of graduations, weddings, bar mitzvahs, christenings, sweet 16 parties, et cetera, et cetera. So what we started doing is promoting the outdoor space, the space the space that we were in.
Yeah.
That's the hottest commodity in the neighborhood.
Right.
But I don't exploit them. All right. I mean, I could probably charge 25% more than I charge, but I keep it the same because I'm getting the volume. So every week I'm having a private party. I mean, the most important thing in the restaurant business is keeping the seats full. All right. And if you got to turn the tables.
Yep.
So
is that in the back, Joe?
Yeah, the back. In the back. We cover it in the wintertime. We just opened the cover. So tonight will be packed.
Yeah.
Got it.
Everybody will want to sit outside.
How do both of you, I know we're nearing the end of our time, so maybe this is a good way to segue out of here. I mean, I'll have one more closing, but there's a question online from one of the students, Jazz DeHue, I believe is how you pronounce the name. How do you guys approach risk taking? Like, how do you think about, what are the things you look for to maybe de-risk a deal, or maybe from a financial perspective, or maybe it's just due diligence overall? What are the things that come to mind when you hear the term risk or de-risking for the spaces you both work in?
Yeah, you have to have big balls. That's
figuratively, risk taking.
Sometimes you just gotta go for it and hope for the best. That's if you like it, hop in.
With Warner's, it was your management, credibility. It wasn't, you weren't personally going to lose, but your company would, and therefore it would impact you as a manager. And I always try to be conservative, but the point is that, when it came to saying we're going to get behind and support this product, if you have a Harry Potter, it's 1,000%, that you can get behind it and support it. And same with a Space Jam, et cetera. But in other products, like, for example, there was a show that I launched a huge program with called Tiny Toons, if you remember that. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the product was out too early and the show wasn't even established yet.
Right.
A year later, the show became very popular and the product was in markdown already. So that was a big mistake.
Okay.
Timing is critical of when you get behind something, when you promote it, when you market it, and then when you come in with a product. If it's too soon, it's dangerous. If it's too late, you've missed the excitement, and timing is critical.
I gotta tell you, if you ever want to have a really great time, Dan took me to the licensing show.
Right,
Oh,
in New York. In New
Yeah,
York, yeah.
that was the
Oh,
best.
Vegas, it's actually in Vegas.
Yeah, in
Vegas
Vegas.
now.
That was the best education that I got in licensing, from Peppa the Pig.
Right,
Heard of. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
The
on,
Hulk
out of
Hogan.
my house.
Yeah, Hulk
Yeah.
Hogan was there signing autographs, and
right,
Cooley and all these other guys. So
Yeah.
they have big brands.
yeah.
They're
Now,
just,
have either of you seen opportunities? Thinking, going back to kind of to Madison's question a little bit, where kind of startups or smaller brands have the ability to partner up with maybe celebrities or folks who can provide leverage to them. Like, those are kind of a one-way street in terms of where the leverage is at. But as an investor, do you ever look for those types of opportunities where you might be able to get behind a smaller brand you have a lot of confidence in, willing to put money on the line to maybe partner or leverage, you know, a bigger voice to become part of the team? Any thoughts on that? Like, how does Madison find her Art Smith or whatever, you know, to think about it from that
I
perspective?
mean, I was pretty lucky because, you know, the Lady Gaga relationship is, that really pays off with the brand. I mean, that brings in people from Brazil, the UK,
Right.
Ireland, France, all year long. I mean, there's tourists coming to New York that want to go to the restaurant. And, if for some reason, like recently, she just finished filming Joker.
Yeah.
In New York, right? As a result, the restaurant was packed because
I think she'll be
everybody thought she was going to show up and have dinner.
Right.
That's so.
Mhm.
But that's the leveraging. That's the leveraging of the celebrity brand.
Yeah.
A lot of that had to do with Art Smith. I met Art Smith at an event, and we became friends. And I told him I wanted to open up this Italian restaurant, and Art was, essential in putting it together. I mean, he had all the relationships with the cookware companies, like, the Woodstones and the Hobarts, et cetera. And, because of that celebrity brand, I mean, he was able to bring in a lot of equipment at little or no cost, right? Plus, he brought in a team of cooks and a general manager, and got the business really started. Okay, he kicked it off.
Right.
And then, I mean, I remember one of the opening nights that we had was New Year's, and who was there? Ryan Seacrest. Ryan Seacrest came, yeah, and that was a launch, all right, because then the press were there, etc. Now what's happening is I'm getting I do a lot of interviews on, like, Fox News, and Fox Business, and to talk about the state of New York, the state of the restaurant business. Last time I was on there, we talked about sobriety. But that generates, any way you can get out there, all right, and show your face and become associated with the brand, that's very powerful, all right, because it brings people. As far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as bad press. I mean, I don't know,
Right.
you guys probably know, when I had the restaurant in Grand Central, I was all over the cover of the Post, right? So, because I wouldn't pay the Mass Transit Authority because it was so miserable down there. Great, but it was great press. All right, it was negative press, but it was great press. So there's no such thing as bad press. Just get in front of the press, talk to them, and sell yourself.
Madison, have you done anything in marketing with your book?
I have. It's mostly local. I haven't done a ton of large scale marketing with it.
Because that's important. I mean, to just go out to, even if you start small, you know, to maybe get on some local television stations, talk about 1 or 2 recipes that resonate with people, and, you know, try getting it out there. You never know when something catches fire,
Yeah.
so to speak.
You have a
Yeah.
publisher?
No, it's I self-published with it.
Well, then you gotta go knock on doors.
Mhm.
Very cool. Well, guys, I know we are nearing the end of the hour here. It's been phenomenal chatting with you both. We could keep going for many hours. I hope this just sets the stage for a another conversation we could have together in this format, because it's a ton of fun. I guess I'll leave it with this, making a one last question. How do you deal with failure?
You pick yourself, you always learn something, and you pick yourself up and you do it again. That's it. Don't give up. All right.
Right.
You know-
Yeah. I remember after Space Jam, I was a hero, and then I promoted another animation movie called Back in Action, which I called Lack of Action. And, you know, I was a bum after that, but it was okay. You know, people forgot about it, you know, after about, they really forgot about that one. You know? So you just go with the flow. You make mistakes and you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
Knowledge
That's
is
the key.
power.
Just make sure you learn. That's right. Make sure you learn.
Exactly.
Don't
Exactly.
repeat them. Right. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate all your time, all you've done for Michigan State. These are diehard Spartans. I know you wear the colors well. So, and thanks for spending time with us this evening.
And Tyson Walker's staying.
You stay in next year's.
Yes. All
Got
right.
All right. All right.
Go Spartans.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great evening, guys.
Take care.
Right.